Welcome to tonight's fight. One question. Should a city have one church or many separate churches? First, one word. The Bible's word for church is Ekklesia, which means the people, not a building. It means the ones who gather. So the whole fight is simple. Do we count those people by each meeting or by the whole city? Red says one church per city, meeting in many rooms. Green says many full churches in one town.
Let's start with what the Bible actually calls people. City after city, it says the church, singular as a single sock. The church at Corinth, the church at Jerusalem, the church at Antioch. One city, one church, every single time. It never once says the churches of Corinth. That plural only pops up for whole sprawling regions like Galatia.
Fine, hand me the singular for a moment. I will hold it gently. Now, weigh the word itself. Church means a group that truly gathers, real bodies in one room. That is why the Bible keeps saying the church in someone's house. And a house holds dozens, not thousands. You cannot fold a stadium crowd into a guy's living room, so a house full of believers is already a whole church, all on its own.
And who leads this crowd? At Ephesus, Paul calls for the elders of the church. One team, one bench. That is a single group of leaders over the whole city, not a brand new boss sprouting up in every living room. The whole city shares one team.
Then explain Rome to me. Paul waves hello to 3 different house churches in one city. Yet he never once writes the church at Rome. If it were really one big church, he owned the words for it. They were sitting right there in his pen, and he just never used them. That silence is my whole case.
Then let's play your silence all the way out. Yes, Paul never wrote the church at Rome. He also never wrote the churches at Rome. He mails one letter to one group to all God's loved ones in Rome. One envelope, one address, one body. A knife that cuts both ways, cuts nobody. And notice, Paul already talks like one whole church is sitting there. He says if the whole church comes together in one place, you cannot bring the whole of a thing together unless it was one thing to begin with. You cannot reunite a crowd that was never one to start.
Watch that logic, though. If saying the whole church came together proves a church is normally split into bits, then saying someone ate the whole loaf proves bread is normally crumbs. It is not. And each little group here runs its own show. It runs its own communion. It handles its own messes. That is a full church, not a branch office with a supply closet.
Quarter way in. Red leans on one word, church, singular, city by city. Green fires back that the word means a real gathering, one that fits in a house. Red still leads, but Green landed a clean hit on Rome.
Here's where the size idea cracks right down the middle. Green's rule says any crowd that big must shatter into many churches. So watch that rule stroll into Jerusalem. Thousands come to faith in a single day, way too many for one house, way too many for one street, and the Bible still calls them the church. Singular, start to finish. The rule breaks the second it touches the floor. And one team ran that entire crowd. When a big question came up, the apostles and the elders settled it together, shoulder to shoulder, as a single body. Not a dozen house groups each holding their own little election. That is one leadership for one city, no matter how many thousands showed up.
But look at how those leaders got picked. The text says Paul and Barnabas appointed elders in each church, one congregation at a time. Church by church, that is the very phrase Luke reaches for. Elders set in place, group by group, not handed down from one citywide board in a corner office. Picture their actual week. Day after day they moved room to room, breaking bread from one home to the next, a slow crawl of dinners across town. That is many small gatherings, not one giant hall swallowing the whole town in a single sitting. The real unit, boots on the ground, is the household church.
Even the old commentators are camped on my side. Wesley and the folks who wrote those tiny study notes crammed in the back of your Bible all read Paul's whole church line the same way, as one church that usually met in several places. And Brannock calls the city church the whole church, with the house meetings as its cells. You wanted a footnote? They already wrote it, in the fine print, and it lands squarely on my side.
But keep reading that footnote. It does not stop where you stopped it. Shering studied that very city, Corinth, and he calls those house churches a federation of separate member churches. And your own Brannock calls the house church the basic seal, and the city church a federation of several house churches. A federation is a pile of churches teaming up, each keeping its own front door, not one blended body.
Now picture what Paul actually sketches for a city's believers. He calls them one body and one temple in that spot. It is a living thing, many parts, many rooms, but one heartbeat running through all of it. A body shares one life. What Green is selling is a pile of rival clubs that happen to share a zip code and a parking lot.
Halfway, Green keeps showing that believers met in houses. Red keeps showing that the city was still named one church with one body of leaders. Red is pulling ahead, but green is not done yet.
Here is who sets the leaders up. Paul tells Titus to appoint elders in every city. In every city means town after town, each one getting its own set. Israel ran the same way. Elders in every town, and nobody ever pretended that meant one government bossing the whole nation from a single chair.
Elders in every city. Read it slow, one word at a time. City, not kitchen. One set of leaders for the whole town, not a shiny new board bolted onto every living room. Green keeps chanting church by church. The text says city by city. A city and a kitchen are not the same size, friend.
Alright, fine, the Bible often says the church, singular. But naming a thing is not commanding a thing. Writing down how people happened to talk back then is not a rulebook for how we must line up now. And no verse anywhere, not one, forbids a town from having several churches.
But the question is about the blueprint, not one thing that happened to happen once, but the plan we are actually handed. And every plan the Bible draws shows one church per city under one team, again and again, with nothing pushing back. Green is asking us to raise a whole house off a floor plan nobody ever drew. Let me even grant that size matters. Say a giant crowd really does strain one room. Fine, granted. Then explain the biggest crowd of them all, one church, in Jerusalem. Thousands upon thousands of people. Somebody, anybody, go find me the second one.
Back to Rome, my firmest ground, the hill I am happy to stand on. It is the one city where we actually see many believers named out loud. So what does Paul call the groups there? The house churches themselves. In Rome, the houses are the churches. That is not some theory I'm shoving onto the text. It is sitting right there on the page in plain ink.
And what does he actually name? 3 households, not a citywide free-for-all of rival churches elbowing each other. Naming a few home meetings is not the same as declaring nobody was over them. You are hearing loud independence in a silence that never said a word about it.
3/4 through. Green's best guard is Rome, where the houses get named as churches. Red answers that no verse ever splits Rome into rival churches, and every clear example stays one church per city. Red is well ahead now.
I will plant my flag on one honest point. Nothing in the text ever forbids a town from having more than one church. Not a line, not a hint, not a whisper, and each single congregation is already whole in itself, missing nothing. So more than one is, at the very least, allowed.
Here the ground Green just tiptoed onto. Not shown, only not forbidden, but allowed on a technicality is a long, long way from drawn on the page. Nothing forbids a church with 2 roofs, a drawbridge, and a moat full of ducks either. That still does not put one in the Bible. Show me the page.
I have to be honest here, and he stings a little. The big cities the Bible actually describes, Jerusalem and Ephesus, both read as one body meeting in many gatherings. The text plainly shows that much, and I have been quietly tap dancing around it. And I will hand you the hard part too. One leadership team per city really is the plain reading of the words. The most I have left is that nothing in the text flatly bans a second church, but allowed is not the same as pictured, and the picture, I admit, is yours.
Then hear what you just described back to yourself. One body for each city, one leadership, meeting in many gatherings. That is not some head office barking orders of branches. That is simply one church in many rooms, which is the whole and entire thing I walked in here to say.
So here is where I finally land. Several separate, self-governing churches crammed into one city. That is pictured nowhere in the text. Nowhere I could dig it up. Meanwhile, the big cities it does describe read as one body in many gatherings. The example is yours. Well argued.
Then we land somewhere good, the 2 of us. Whatever we build, let it look like the first believers did. One people in each city, joined together, serving one Lord side by side.
And there it is. Red closes at 97, green at 47, a 50-point gap. Once green granted that the one clear example is a single church per city, red took it decisively. A clean, honest fight. Good night.